So hi, everybody. Thank you so much to be back on the Dear Global Leader podcast. And today I have another fantastic guest, Lise Bruynooghe. She's a coach and executive coach from the renowned organization ICF. You're also a board member, so we'll talk about that in I think the part number two. Um, and you are helping navigating complexity on leaders, founders, executive team. So we'll have time to talk about that today. I think what is really important, what I liked about your coaching is that you are talking about cross-cultural navigation, but also organizational change, and also like navigating transitions that can be personal and professional, where perspective, identity, and value collides. So I think today people knows we will talk about what does it mean to be coachable, and also when you are coachable, how do you adapt without losing yourself? So I'm super excited to have you today. As always, we will be in now for like about an hour that will be divided in two parts, part one and part two. And the first question I will ask you is maybe to present a bit yourself and tell us what was the pivot that brought you where you are.
With pleasure. First of all, thank you very much, Tiffen, for having me on the show. It is funny because pivots sometimes start a long time ago. And very often we refer to the moment when things change, but there were many seeds planted along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And so one first such seed was when I was working for the EBRD, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. And I was working on change management. The president
Mm-hmm.
had come in and he had a very ambitious vision for the organization and where he wanted to take it. And I had joined his team as advisor, and I was looking after the change program. And I remember how I felt that my skill set, which essentially was finance, international relations, didn't really give me what I needed to work effectively on change. And when I mentioned that to a colleague of mine over coffee, he looked at me and he was like, Lise, you need to train as a coach. And I had no idea what coaching was. So I asked him, Stefano, what is it? Tell me more. I'm curious. And after that conversation, I essentially enrolled in the same coaching program that he had done, simply because I trusted him, and I don't like to waste my time on research if someone I trust, has a good and valid recommendation. So that was, if you want, the first seed. And I used the coaching skills more as one would use the ability to speak English, or as one would use the ability to, work with certain technical tools. And so never in my mind would I have thought that it would become my full-time career as it is right now. And so that took some more time. And the next pivot was when we moved from the UK to Switzerland. And there I had a job lined up. But it didn't feel right. So I decided to not take on that job. And then I had plenty of time on my hands and various people and organizations calling me and asking, hey, can you help with this? Can you support with that? And that essentially was, if you want, the birth of my current coaching practice.
Super. But then maybe you can let us know who calls you usually. Is it like a HR person? Is it the person that wants to be coach? Is it like a full team? And maybe you can explain also what is your process. I've been in the Dear Global Leader podcast. We love the backstage, understanding the blueprint, things that usually is behind the curtain. So if you can a bit let us know how do you work?
Well, so if you want the real behind the curtain, I would again kind of go to the seeds and then to what is today. Because in the beginning, I would say yes to everyone, obviously, because I had lots of time and I had nothing to do. So it was like, okay,
you needed
you
to
want a
practice
training?
also,
Fine.
maybe.
You want team coaching? Great. You want an org design kind of thing? Fine. Basically, anything that I had experience in that I knew how to do, I would say yes to. And so in terms of who would call me, very often it would be HR departments for organizations, very often leadership team or executive teams, so the CEO and their team or the CFO and their team, because of my past. And I had been advising the president, I had been advising the CAO, I had been chief of staff. So I was bringing that kind of experience to the table. I was also also, requested quite frequently for leadership programs or trainings or for workshops and things like that,
Mhm.
and for consultancy on organizational design. And over time, I then started to really listen to myself. So the energy or the excitement that I would feel ahead of certain engagements and ahead of certain clients. And so that made me refine what I do now. And so now I do coaching only, and it is mostly either individuals or teams. And so teams, I still stay at that executive level, so
Mhm.
CEO and their team, or very often I also have companies where you have co-CEOs or a structure of partners who
Mhm.
all have the same voting rights. And so I would work with them or with individual persons who then reach out to me because very often they're at some kind
Mhm.
of pivotal moment in their
Mhm.
lives and in their careers.
And then what is the process usually with this individual? What are they coming for? And do you have a certain, I don't know, steps that you're looking for? Or is it more like situational or individualistic, the approach?
Yeah. So I'd say you have the package and then what happens within that package, right? So the package is the same for everyone in the sense that there's a choice between essentially two products or two services. One is a deep dive. So you come to me in Switzerland and we spend 2 days together and we usually go on a hike in the mountains and we do coaching. So obviously the
Mm.
coaching is front and center. So the hike is adapted to whatever physical ability the people have.
Mhm.
And really it is more using nature as an instrument to unlock new insights, to unlock
Mhm.
progress within the client. That is very useful for someone who's a little bit lost in terms of possibilities, like should I do this or that or
Mm.
this or that. And
Mm.
the 2 days really help to look at everything, because sometimes things are looked at in isolation. So you look just as
Mm.
at work, but then they may have elderly parents that they need to care for, and they may have a
Mm.
family, and they may have a partner, and they may have certain hobbies that are very time intensive or money intensive, and that as a result constrain their decision making on the professional front. So it's really looking at the entire picture. That takes time, and that sometimes also takes quite a bit of digging, in terms of, by digging I mean that very often people limit themselves, me included, everyone limits
Mm.
themselves by childhood stuff and
Mm.
societal stuff, certain rules, certain ways of
Mm.
being in the world that we have internalized so much that we don't realize it's not us. And so
Mm.
that needs time to unpack, to realize, I've been living my life this way, but actually, that's not me.
Mm.
That's maybe my father, my mother, my culture, where I come from, and to kind of detach
Mm.
yourself from it. So that's the 2 days in nature. And then the other, if you want, product or
Mm.
service is more focused on implementation. And so here it's a range of sessions. Sometimes it's 6 sessions, sometimes it's
Mhm.
over a whole year. It depends a
Mhm.
little bit on the scope of what you want to do. So for most
Mm.
people, 6 sessions will be sufficient to move them from where they are to where they want to be. But for some people, especially if they're setting up a new company or if they
Mm.
are making a very big move that impacts everything,
Yeah.
then obviously the year-long retainer is really helpful.
And the big question for me is like, what does it mean to be coachable? Because we always
Mm.
hear about it. And do you sense also when people comes, do you take the people that you only feel are coachable, or how do you sense that? Is there some, KPIs that
Yeah,
you see?
yeah. So, and I remember you and I had a conversation around this in another call. And there was this assumption in the room of, you can only be coached when you are a senior leader. That's not true.
Exactly.
Like
Yeah.
anyone can be coached. The what coachable means is that you are willing to be challenged. You are willing for someone to point out certain inconsistencies in what
Yeah.
you say, what you do. And this is not very Well, it's never very comfortable if someone points
Mm,
out, well, you say this, but you
mm,
do the opposite.
mhm,
And so, or you say this value is nice, but it sounds to me like you just say this because people like hearing this, but you don't really mean it.
mhm,
And so having that challenge requires a real openness and also willingness to play sometimes, to be like, what if, let's
mm,
experiment, let's try. And so that's what the coachable piece means. If you're closed off and you don't want to get any feedback, you don't want to get
mm,
any challenge, you're not interested in changing, then the poor coach can try everything they want, all sorts of ways of
mm,
asking, they won't get anywhere. And so there needs to be that openness, that willingness to change, and with it always comes discomfort. We were
mm,
talking about it with people I train to become coaches, so
mm,
they learn coaching skills. And literally there's at the beginning you have that strong enthusiasm, you like everything, and then at some point there's this valley of I don't know,
mhm,
this very strong discomfort where, because you're learning, you're growing, you're stretching.
mm.
It's a little bit when you exercise and your muscles are painful after the exercise. That's kind
Yeah,
of what coaching takes.
yeah. It's really funny because it's something I am actually reminding myself is that sometimes you feel in this discomfort or in this, I don't know, transition, and you don't feel comfortable, but at the same time you know that you're on the step then moving forward, because if you're on the
Yes.
plateau things are doing fine and you need to find like a balance. So maybe it's a good trigger to feel that. Of course we need to figure it out that it's not toxic environment, but like if you feel challenged, maybe it means that you're on the right road. At least this is something I saying to myself.
Yeah. And there is, and that's, where a good coach will kind of know how far to push, because
Yeah.
obviously sometimes there are moments where a client will be more vulnerable and
Mm-hmm.
you can't push that much
Okay.
because they're already pretty much on the edge. They're already in a lot of discomfort. Let's imagine they're going through a massive restructuring. Their
Mm-hmm.
partner may be unemployed. They may have the financial
Mm,
burden for I don't know how many kids and elderly parents. And so if you then add more pressure to it, this may tip them over the edge. So it's
mm-hmm.
always that kind of dance of understanding, okay, what does the person need right now? I remember a person who hired me and explicitly told me, I want you to challenge the hell out of me. And yet
Mm-hmm.
one day we entered into a session and they were, like the tears were literally here.
Mm,
I could sense they were on the verge of crying, and they did,
mm,
in fact, cry in the session. And so at that point, I said, look, today does not feel like a session where you need strong challenge. How would you
mm,
like me to, like, first, is that right? And then they were like,
mm,
yes,
mm,
I don't want to be challenged,
mm,
crying. And then I asked, okay, so how do you need me to show up today? And that's the partnering that coaches always talk about. It's this relationship is always co-created. So it's always asking the person, who do you need me to be today? You know,
mhm,
do I need to be the devil's advocate? Do I need to really be super hard on you? Or do I need to be
mm,
soft and supportive and or more of your cheerleader? And that can
mhm,
change within a session as well. So you can go through all sorts of
mhm,
interaction modes depending on what helps the client move forward towards their goals.
mhm. And then if you were saying before that this is not the person that will be coached that calls you, how do you know that this person is willing to be coached? Because
Yeah,
I'm the HR, I call you, I tell you, okay, I
absolutely.
would love that you grow this person, but maybe this person is not yet aware of all the gaps they will need to go, or maybe this person doesn't know that they want to go to the next level. So how do you handle this situation?
Yeah. And that depends a lot on the context as well, right? Because, I mean, the example you just shared of, oh, HR calls, I would love that
Mm,
you grow this person. That's a positive case. Very often they
mm,
call and they're like, this person is not performing. We need to tick the
ah,
boxes that we've done everything we could, but essentially we want them out. Like, and so then it's like,
mm,
whoa, who are you serving? Are you serving the
mm,
organization? Are you
mm,
serving the person you're talking to? Are you
mhm.
serving that person's manager? It's
Yeah.
there's so many stakeholders, and so as part of the contracting it's really important to know who you're serving, what are your degrees of freedom within the relationship, And where does your personal loyalty lie? Because
Mhm.
obviously, if you have a contract with an organization, which is, a judicial entity, but there's
Mm.
no human being as such
Yeah.
representing it, and you're talking to a human being every day or, once per week, maybe, then over time, you kind of develop a relationship with that human
Yes.
being. So this is where a lot of ethical conundrums can arise and where it's really helpful to have supervision to kind of talk it through with other professional coaches and
Mm.
figure out, okay, what do you
Mhm.
do? I remember once an engagement where HR called me and said, look, we can't deal with this person anymore. They are getting on our nerves. We'd love them to be out. And so I talked to the manager and I said, what is my mandate within those sessions? If the person wants to explore leaving the organization, do I
Mhm.
have your green light to do that within sessions that are being paid for by the company?
Mm.
Or do you want me to actually say, I'm so sorry, this is outside of the scope. The scope is just to see
Mm.
how you can improve your performance within that current job.
Mm.
And so those are questions that are really important to discuss upfront. However, having said that, I've also been in situations where I discussed things extremely explicitly upfront. I was
Mhm.
being assured, no, 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 this is real coaching. We're really
Mm.
interested in that person's growth. But it,
Mhm.
it was, in fact, box ticking. And it was, in
Oh.
fact, for them to be able to tell that they had done everything they could. So there
Mhm.
are moments where, as a coach, you're being used. And that doesn't feel very nice, but
Mhm.
that can happen as well.
Yeah, maybe you don't, there is a link of trust here. So maybe then
Absolutely. I
after,
never
if the
worked with that
person
client
called you,
again.
yeah, yeah, if they called you back, maybe it's a breach of trust.
Yeah.
Coming back to what you were saying earlier, in our discussion about being coachable, we both had the feeling that, it happens at different level. And a lot of emerging leaders will listen to this podcast. And I wanted to know, if you don't have the chance to take a formal coaching, like executive coach, because you are not at this level, what do you sense are something that emerging leaders usually needs to be coached on, or
Mm,
they need to be alert on learning about?
mm. So, first of all, maybe I think there always is the opportunity to find a coach because
Hmm.
coaches, especially as some who are starting out, they very often need hours to be certified. And
Hmm.
so a lot of them would be willing to coach either for free or at very low levels because it
Hmm.
gives them the practice. So then, yes, you don't get like the super duper experienced
Hmm.
coaching, but it still is a human being with a really good intention who's trying their best. So a
Hmm.
lot of the people I train, they're desperate for hours. And I pair them up with people who are too junior or maybe can't afford my
Hmm.
fees. And then I'm like, okay, no problem. I know
Hmm.
someone who's really good. Let's pair you up with them.
Hmm.
In terms of the working, I think the biggest gap for, say, first level managers, if you want, or first time managers, or people who grow in the organization,
Hmm.
is when
Hmm.
you move from being an individual contributor to doing something where you need to contribute via others. And so
Yeah.
that is a big challenge. So people then very often struggle with delegating, struggle with the lack of control because they're not the ones doing everything anymore, but other people need to contribute. So you need to trust that the contribution will arrive on time and will be of the quality that you need. And so there's a lot of stuff there around that. And so here it's a lot around communication, around a boundary setting, around pushing back, around difficult conversations. Like if something was delivered
Mm.
and the quality is not great and the person did not care and you ended up working on the weekend or in the evening to kind of
Mm.
rectify it, that's not okay. So how do you do this? And very often people are afraid of conflict. Like, oh, if I say
Mm.
this, and sometimes they may not even have the formal reporting line, kind of a hierarchy that allows them to have those
Mm.
conversations because they're the manager and the other person is
Yeah.
below them. So it's really around influencing skills, and working much more systemically and quite creatively sometimes to find the resources that you need within the system who will really like you, and because they like you, because they find you inspiring, because they enjoy being with you, who will then contribute their time and their
Mhm,
intellect to help you achieve whatever KPI you need to achieve.
mhm. Actually, then another question that came, I totally agree with you. I think it's really spot on. But what is, the top, I don't know, three coachable skills that you always see coming back? Like the people comes back, and it's always like the top three topics that you have to discuss.
And do you mean for emerging leaders, or do you mean in
In
general?
general, sorry, I
In
mean in
general?
general.
hmm So I'd say boundary setting is a big one that comes again and again and again.
Okay, yeah.
Lots
With
of
work,
people
do you mean
pleasers.
work life balance, or do you mean people that interacts
No,
with you and you need to put some boundaries?
no, not with me, in their lives.
Okay.
So, oh, can you do this extra report?
Mm.
No, I can't. Oh,
The
can
people
you go to
pleasing.
this
Yes,
conference? No,
we
I
are there.
can't. Like that
Yeah.
kind of, because there's a lot of fear in saying no. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'd say fear is the next one. So they're all related, but boundary
Mm-hmm.
setting, being very clear on what you do, what you don't do, what you stand for, what you do not stand for. So it
Mm-hmm.
aligns with values. Sometimes there are things that really cross your values. And then to say, I'm so sorry, I cannot participate in this project or do it in this way for and those reasons. Or maybe I need to leave the company because what you're
Mm-hmm.
doing is not ethical and I can't stand for it. So they're very difficult decisions always around boundary setting.
Mm.
The other one is around fear. So much of it is, what will they think of me? Will they still
Oh,
like me? Will I still
okay.
belong? And
Mm-hmm.
and so this is in many little everyday things that people are afraid to stand their ground, share their opinion, or have a hard stop on certain things because they feel that if they do, they may not belong to the
Mm-hmm.
group anymore because obviously there's a bit of tension coming in. And so
Mm.
that's another one. And very much linked to that is having difficult conversations. They're all linked, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
it's how can I have that conversation without endangering the relationship? So
Mm-hmm.
whilst still preserving the relationship with that person. And I think that probably the ways of interacting of our times don't make it easier.
Yeah.
Before we had smartphones and all this kind of
Mm.
virtual world, we were forced to have those
Mm.
interactions in person,
Yeah.
everywhere on the street and public transport, etc. So it gave us a playing ground. It gave us an
Mm-hmm.
ability to practice. And now these days we don't agree, well, we just block someone or we unfollow
Mm.
them, or so it's like
Mm.
poof, and
Okay.
there's no conversation. And so
Yeah.
as a result, we are highly uncomfortable when we are in a situation where we need to have a conversation because we don't, the behavior we've learned so far is just to block someone.
Oh,
So
okay. I see. I see. And maybe it's a wrong interpretation of mine, but I thought that a lot of executives, sorry, were using coaches to go to the next level, to be promoted. Okay, I want to go to the next level, I'll take a coach. And I wanted to understand across the courses of your sessions, when do you know that this person is promotable? This person is ready. Do you sense like a shift? What?
so this depends again on whether the person booked the coach themselves. Then
Okay, yes.
the
I
act
see.
of seeking out a coach, of investing in a coach, already tells you everything you need to know. They are ready.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, they wouldn't do the investment.
Mm-hmm.
If they've been sent by HR, this is a different story.
Okay,
And so then
I
you
see.
need to find out, what do they want in life. I had someone recently who realized, the usual path, like you're in an organization, you deliver good work as a sole contributor. Oh, let's
Mm-hmm.
promote them. Which is why
Mm-hmm.
we have so many shitty managers, because they get promoted based on technical excellence, but
Mm-hmm.
maybe they do not like to lead people.
Mm.
And so
Or we
that
don't equip
person,
them. Is it what
exactly.
you
Or we
mean?
don't equip them, but sometimes
Yeah.
it's really that they don't want to. And that
Okay.
person realized that. She was like, I don't want to manage anyone. Like, this is
Mhm.
tiring. I really don't enjoy that.
Mhm.
And to have that, and more organizations luckily recognize that. So very often they have a kind of expert pathway
Yeah.
for individual contributors, and then they have a management pathway for those who do enjoy leading people.
Mm.
And then those obviously also need to be equipped, because only because you enjoy doing something doesn't mean you're good at it. Like, I may enjoy playing the piano, but if no one teaches me how to do it, I'm
Mm.
not going to be very good at it, right? So
Mhm.
you need to equip, but you first, before you equip anyone, you need to see, is that actually something they enjoy doing? So that's
Mhm.
this in the promotable. It's
Mm.
looking which pathway you want to be promoted on.
Mhm.
And then once you've identified the pathway, obviously equipping them. And so back to your question for equipping, I think self-awareness is a really big one, because there is so much stuff that we have that is our problem and that we
Mhm.
project then onto the team. So I'll give you a
Mhm.
very common example. If someone had a bad morning with their partner or their
Mhm.
children at home, they're likely to bring a bad mood into the office. The team can't, it's not the team's fault, but still it goes into
Mhm.
the meeting. So the person is going to be snappy, less patient, maybe will
Mhm.
listen less. So having that self-awareness and then that emotional self-regulation to be able to say, okay, I've got pretty
Mhm.
stupid stuff going on at home, but let's somehow find a way to manage this so that at
Mhm.
work I can still deliver and be present for my team. So this would
Mhm.
be, I think, the first one, and then there are many more skills,
Mm.
situational awareness, influencing skills, knowing how to communicate and listen to others. And funnily enough, a lot of those skills are actually coaching skills. So,
Okay.
if you learn coaching skills, you can be a pretty fantastic leader.
Because it's a lot about questioning and listening, and it seems to
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's listening, it's questioning, it's seeing patterns, it's
Mhm.
noticing what's not being said, and it's
Mhm.
challenging. And
Yeah.
then part of coaching is also always looking, okay, so what do we do next? What's the
Yeah.
next action? And then being extremely clear on, okay, when will you do it? By when? How do you know? What is some support you may need? What are some obstacles? What do you need in terms of accountability? So that's very related to a lot
Mhm.
of the everyday leadership conversations that someone needs to have.
Yes, super. And maybe then to circle back on the question, if you say that this person calls you, this person is ready to go to the next level, but then the organization maybe doesn't see it this way yet, then through the coaching, this person may be gaining confidence and so on. Um, when I mean, maybe the question is not that clear, but like my question is like, when do you think that this person will actually get promoted after the
Mhm.
coaching? What will be something that this person will have gained through the coaching? Is it, like visibility? Is it expressing your needs? Is it, I don't know, something I cannot even imagine that then show to the rest of the people, hey, look, I'm ready.
Yeah, yeah. Well, actually, you named quite a bit of it. So, two things. Sometimes someone will come and be very clear. This is the next role I want. That's the
Mm-hmm.
title. This is where it sits in the org chart. I want it.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that's easy in the sense of, well, first you check, like, okay, is there a skills mismatch, a competency mismatch? If yes,
Mm-hmm.
well, how do you get that? How do you
Mm-hmm.
get that extra experience that your organization will want you to have to really be considered as ready? But then a lot of it is sharing it. Many people want things, but they don't share it. If no one knows that that's what you want, you'll never get it.
Mm-hmm.
And so really helping them to see, okay, who are the persons within the system that actually influence that decision?
Mm-hmm.
Do those persons even know that you exist? Do they
Mm-hmm.
even know that you have that ambition? Have you proved that you're ready for that ambition? If not, what kind of stretch assignments do you need to do to show them that you're ready, etc. Right? So it's a really kind of, this is where you want to go. Here's the pathway, and
Mm-hmm.
how do we get there? And then there's the other case of someone who just has a blurry sense of, I'm ready for the next level,
Mm-hmm.
but it's very blurry and they don't know yet what the next level could be. And so there, obviously, you start a little bit earlier on the pathway with, okay, have coffee with people who work in there. Ask them, how does their day look like? Da, da, da. See what resonates. What do you enjoy? What would you like? Look at your skill set. Maybe do a 360 to figure out what are your strengths? What do people see in you? So
Mm-hmm.
it's more around getting that kind of picture first, noticing what energizes them, what do they enjoy doing, what comes easily to them, and then being like, okay, maybe this could be this role or that role or this role, and then doing the same thing as we had discussed for the other person who already knows what they want.
Super. Maybe then last question to close the part one about being coachable. You mentioned that you coach sometimes some leadership team, like all together groups,
Yeah.
or at least in the past. What's the difference then of coaching an individual to a group and also at this level?
Yeah, well, the individual, you still have the system in the room. Obviously, sometimes they have a manager or they have a board of
Mm,
directors they're reporting into. They have peers, they have their whole family,
mm,
and so that is all in the room. But obviously, you're only working with one person. When you
mm.
have the team, it the complexity just multiplies, right? Because you have one, two, three, four,
Yeah.
five, six. And so then the options for interrelationships, if you were to draw us as points
Mm,
and
mm,
then
mm,
you
mm.
map the connections, the possible connections between the players in the room just increase exponentially. And so
Yeah.
as a coach, you need to manage that. And we work on the relationship, we work in the relational field. So really being very attuned to what is being said, what is not being said, how does one person being in the room or not being in the room shift the entire dynamic that is within the team, and then making that obvious, and bringing that to the fore and saying, oh, I'm noticing that yesterday
Mm,
so and so was sick and the dynamic was this and
mm,
this, and today this person is back and the dynamic is that. Does
mm-hmm.
this happen in the workplace as well? If yes, what can we learn? So it needs to have a strong level of trust. Some teams you're able to really go deep into the relational field quite quickly. Others you need to kind of be a bit more careful and slower in kind of digging
Mm-hmm.
deeper. And there are methods for doing that. So to give you an example, one team where psychological safety was not fully there,
Okay.
instead of voicing things directly, I had an exercise where they would write down, what I don't feel comfortable saying is, and then they write
Mm-hmm.
it down so they don't need to share it. And I don't feel comfortable sharing this because, and the because
Mm,
is what we would then talk about. So
okay.
this way you work on psychological safety and the ability for people to actually be open and have those conversations, but in a way that feels safe and not too exposing for people.
Super. Look, we're already going into like the second part slowly, so I think it's time to maybe close the part one. So thank you so much for having been here with us. And for the rest, I think they can just go on your LinkedIn or on your website. You can mention the name
Absolutely.
again. I will put it in the note of the show, but I think it's yourname.com, right?
Yes, so it's my first name, Lise, and my last name, Bruynooghe, and they will need the notes because the spelling is
Yes,
complicated.
it's there is
.com.
some traps there.
Yes.
Super. But look, I see you in the part two then. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tiffen.